Gosh, hello everybody. I'm not sure what's happening in my studio this evening, but I was not able to play my intro for some reason. I'm not sure who's in the chats, but if someone can just let me know you guys can see me and hear me, please, I'd appreciate that because everything went dead here for a second. Hello, you can see me, Charmaine, Jan. Thank you so much. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Saturday in Aquarius Rising Africa. And thank you, M13. And of course, I have with me the wonderful Jerry Marzinsky. I always want to call Jerry Dr. Jerry because I think he's much, much more knowledgeable than any doctor could ever imagine to be. He's a doctor plus so much more. I mean, with such a wealth of knowledge and experience. Anyway, we're going to be talking to Jerry tonight about narcissism and schizophrenia. You know, these are topics that are, well, especially narcissism. The word narcissism is thrown around a lot nowadays. And of course, Jerry being an expert on schizophrenia, we're going to see the comparisons. Are they the same? Where does the similarities lie? So we're going to be definitely delving more into that. But just before I bring Jerry on with me, for those of you who are Patreon members, Book Club with Jesse tomorrow on Patreon. So please join us for that and join our Patreon. We've got lots of stuff going on there. Or our membership on YouTube, yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then, of course, Monday, Beverly Roads again. Awesome spilling tea shows and guests at this point. Wow, really excited to have everyone on the show. But anyway, without any further ado, ta-da, Jerry, welcome back. How are you? We missed you last month.
I'm good. Been busy.
Your shirt is looking very bright and sparkly, Jerry. Are you having a good time there?
That's my uniform.
I love it. I'm feeling very jealous. You can see I'm freezing. So you're looking very California, I have to say.
Oh yeah, it's 90 degrees here right now. It's 9 in the morning. So is it winter where you're at in South Africa?
Yes, it's winter and it's cold, Jerry. We're having a very cold winter here. So much colder than last year, yes. So as you can say, I'm all wrapped up with, I think, maybe 3 or 4 layers underneath. But anyway, we shall heat up the airwaves with our conversation tonight, or this morning for you, no doubt. So I look forward to that. And I want to just say welcome to everybody in the chat. Golan Ogong, Charmaine, I think Lisa D, Joanne. And guys, sorry, just before we go ahead, Janice Gilmore, who's one of the moderators of this channel, her partner was murdered on Thursday. So please just send out prayers and thoughts to our lovely Janice Gilmore. And from what I can understand, hopefully the perpetrators hopefully being brought to justice. So please just keep her in your prayers for that to happen as well. Horrible things happening at this point in time. It's not the first horror story, Jerry, but goodness me, you must have some horror stories too, right?
Well, we're hearing about what's happening to your farmers over there, and you know that I know they brought your president over here, and he denied it, and Trump actually showed him the graveyards and the news articles and stuff like that right on, exposed him publicly, and he just didn't know what to say. He was like, duh, 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 duh. They showed him fostering this crap.
You know, it's that has been going on for decades and decades and decades. I kid you not. And our media around that has been so censored. And every time he's gone overseas and he's asked about it, he flatly has denied it. And no one has actually had I want to say balls, I'm going to say balls, to actually call him out on that. And of course, we were very, very, very grateful for Trump because as a farm girl myself, rest assured, these things have been happening for a very long time. I know people close to me that's happened to. In fact, my parents were attacked more than once. My family members, my one sibling, and this wasn't a foul murder, but this is just part of the crime here. Also just shot by 3 guys on the side of the road, left there. My other sister has been, her home has been broken into and violated. Her kids pulled around by the hair. Her partner shot in the leg. Literally, the guy put the gun in front of her head, pulled the trigger, but it jammed. I mean, she had a mirror. I mean, she's a warrior. I tell you, it's in this country, you got to have hair on your teeth. I've lost my fiance to a carjacking. Yeah.
Wow. And of course they took your guns away, right? They took all your guns away. Yeah, you can't allow to have guns.
Yeah. And really at the moment, because the laws, with a reverse apartheid, the laws are very, very race-based, but there's about 70 very race-based laws in Parliament right now that basically say, so if you come, if somebody comes into my property and I defend myself by shooting them, I'm not allowed to do that. Not allowed to do that.
That's what the Democrats were trying to do here. And that's what they were doing to people who did defend themselves before Trump took over. They were going after the same thing, the deep state. They did everything they could to remove our guns. But boy, right. we weren't standing for it.
Well, exactly. And you see, that's what's happening now. And I think Elon Musk as well, being an ex-South African, would have certainly brought that to Trump's attention for sure. Which is why I think Elon was also in that meeting. And of course, I want to just tell you all, that guy, Johan Rupert, you saw, the big white dude, that traveled with Cyril, that is the actual guy that runs this country, by the way. This country is not a sovereign state anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. It's a CC. And Johan Rupert, and he's the head of the biggest, we call it the Stellenbosch Mafia, very heavily linked to all the deep state secret societies running the country. He runs the country. Cyril is just the spokesperson. I mean, and that's why when South Africa has been used as a guinea pig for all of this stuff. I mean, the Jim Crow laws are all apartheid-based laws that we had installed here, or everything. I mean, anything, we tested for. It's crazy. Now we want to talk about narcissism. Now that's narcissism in its highest degree. When you see how they've played, and they still are. That guy, Julius Malema, who's shouting, kill the boer, kill the farmer, the leader of the EFF. Now him, the Democratic Alliance, who's supposedly the multiracial party, and then the ANC, are all in cahoots. They all are members of the close corporation that is now South Africa. So then you tell me what farce they are playing there. It's a big, fat farce. It really, really is. I mean, they are keeping apartheid. I mean, if you come to the general people in South Africa, black and white, we actually like each other. We hang out. I've got my granddaughter's mixed race. So, we've long ago, have we as the people integrated, long ago. There's many mixed marriages here, many mixed babies, lots. But that's exactly the narrative that they put out. And yes, they're going to show you our professional rugby teams and things playing black and white together. But that's a lie, because really at the end of the day, they keep the people, the politics, right? They'll have a certain demographic that they keep alive with that racial hate. And that's what they keep fueling.
Now,
to keep it like that, because it serves.
Do you feel Britain is playing a part in this like they did with Ukraine? Here and doing here too. I mean, the king went over to Canada, and all of a sudden, here's well, we're not putting up with anything from the United States, and it was this, you know, really kind of vicious trade war kicked off
Yeah,
after the king visited, and then there was a statement I saw that Canada is still a province of the king and queen of England, and
yeah,
subject to their orders. And then you look at what Britain and France did when Trump was trying to end the war in Ukraine. They just went right against what he was doing, sent over millions and millions of dollars for weapons, and is egging Zelensky on to keep it up.
yeah. Unfortunately, they do that, and they have been doing it for such a long time. And of course, the
Yeah,
Britain, the British are as much as what everyone is talking about, the Boers, the Afrikaners that are the architects of apartheid, it never was like that. I mean, if you look at the history, the Dutch were actually trading here with the Khoisan, who were the original owners of the land, not these people shouting and screaming and fighting now. They're not the owners of this land. It's the Khoisan. And when the Dutch came in, they were trading with the Khoisan. And then they actually had offspring. So the Dutch and the Khoisan had offspring known as the Griquas. So the Griquas are like what we call the colored people, the original colored race of South Africa. And De Beer, who was the original Dutch owner of the mines here, was already trading with the Khoisan people, and they had given him land where he was mining. There was no harshness until the Oppenheimers came in with what is known as the gold rush. And that's when the Oppenheimers were all part of the Khazarian mafia and all of this that started that whole big Anglo gold and whatever these other companies are called. Anglo-American, blah, blah, blah. They then brought in all these prospectors to take over from the Hollanders, De Beers. And that's when the war started, actually. It was the British that came in here. And they were the architects of apartheid. And there's big wars going on, the Anglo-Boer War here, with the Dutch and the British. And tribes. It's crazy.
yeah, they've
It's
been doing
really
that.
crazy when you...
They've been doing that for a long time. They've done it over here. They're trying to suck us up into that war with Ukraine. That Ukraine's run by the Khazarian mafia. It's one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. There's drug trafficking, child trafficking, women trafficking. It's all run through there, and Russia's wanting to get rid of it along with the Nazis. But you don't hear that part. They don't ever talk about that.
Yeah. That's crazy. So we are governed and controlled by a bunch of narcissists, Jerry. So now that we are this topic of, a global narcissism, maybe you can help us understand, because, when I look at schizophrenia, obviously schizophrenia is voices in the head, but we understand now that it's not really that. But I'm wondering that when you've been a narcissist for so long, and we're going to understand the difference because you're going to tell us soon, but would schizophrenia be something that maybe would be the next step of that?
They have some common traits, but there's also a lot of very different traits. Schizophrenia, they basically say, is a break from this reality, into another reality. And when I was studying the voices and some of the stuff that happened to me, those two realities were very, very different. It's like I had a foot in each world. And, when some of the crazy stuff that started happening to me when I was studying the voices started happening, I couldn't talk to anybody in this reality about it because they were so different. It was they go, okay, well, this reality isn't, the schizophrenic reality isn't real. It's very real. It's got its own rules. It's got its own entities. It's got its own patterns. but they don't match what this reality is. So where we're on now. So it was like I had a foot in both worlds, and I couldn't talk to anybody in the supposedly sane world about what I was experiencing in the psychotic world, you know, dealing with schizophrenics, talking to them about their voices. But I could talk to virtually all the schizophrenics about what I was experiencing and what I was seeing, and they could relate to it. So here they're saying that what schizophrenics are experiencing are hallucinations, but they haven't studied it at all. It's just the psychiatrists and big pharma just go, well, we hereby declare that what these people are experiencing are hallucinations without any evidence. They haven't studied the voices. They haven't looked into them. They just deemed them hallucinations, and then that was it. And they're still pushing it. I mean, I looked up schizophrenia causes just this morning, and here they're still pushing the biochemical imbalance theory, which had been proved wrong a decade ago. They're making $14.7 billion on selling antipsychotic drugs all over the planet, which don't cure anything. And I'm sure they have some med for narcissism. They got a medicine for everything. But yeah, they're basically categories of behavior, and they're not as sharp as they like them to make out. There's not these very sharp lines of, where one, they call them disorders. One disorder starts and another one begins. They kind of bleed into one another, across the lines. And all these things are made up by a group of psychiatrists that meet once every 3 years, and they just make these things up. There's not one objective test for any of the almost 300 diagnoses they have in their DSM right now. They just make them up, and 2/3 of the people involved with that are, associated with big pharma. So I think they make them up to be able to come up with some kind of drug that they can make a profit of to treat these things. But
But it makes me wonder why they're saying, Jerry, that if what was that, the chemical imbalance has been disproved a decade ago, legally, surely they can't still be pushing that theory and still making drugs.
they're doing it. They're doing it. They may change the wording a little. They go, well, it is believed that, that was one of the one that I saw. Schizophrenia is due to a chemical brain imbalance. Like I said before, they don't even know what the chemical brain balance of neurotransmitters should be. They have no idea. There is no proof of a chemical brain imbalance. So like we said before, they kicked it up to genetics to start with, and that's what they're doing with narcissism too. They go, oh well, it's genetics. They haven't found any gene for narcissism or any gene for schizophrenia. It's just not there.
I think when we look at these things, or what I think is a common thread here is that any of these extreme, call it personality disorders, okay? I don't want to label anything. I don't like labels, but for want of a better expression, it always begins with severe trauma or some type of traumatic event that's occurred quite early on in life. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think most mental problems are due to trauma. And what the ego does is it takes that trauma and it buries it in the subconscious and locks it down, but it's still alive. It's still affecting the person's behavior. So that's one of the things that MACE does. The MACE is a new cutting edge energetic psychotherapy. It'll go into the subconscious, find that stuff, and discharge it. So it's like if you get a car battery and you charge it up to full and you discharge it all the way down to nothing, that battery's garbage. You can't ever recharge it again. So mace goes in there and does the same thing. It finds these pockets of negative energy that are charged up, that are buried in the subconscious, and it discharges them. So the person will remember the trauma, but there won't be any emotion associated with it.
Yeah, the charge is gone. I fully agree. And I will absolutely vouch for that because, as I've mentioned before, I've had a couple of sessions with you on that, and it really is amazing, actually.
Yeah, and I don't find too many narcissists showing up in my private practice. But what I do find is a lot of victims of narcissists showing up in my private practice. You know, they don't come; they cause damage out there. But I have a lot of victims coming in, going, I'm messed up. I'm totally messed up. They. Yeah, but one thing I was talking to one gal that ran a narcissism site. I was doing an interview with her. And one thing that kind of struck me is that the voices schizophrenics here go after the wounded. They go after the people who are severely psychologically, sexually, or physically abused. And they attack them. They're like sharks that smell blood in the ocean and go after the weakest and the wounded. She said that the narcissist goes after high energy people because they're parasitic. They suck on their energy. And from what I've seen of the victims, yeah, they're down on energy. They're abused, they're sucked dry. They don't know what hit them, what happened to them, because a lot of times these guys have a good facade. They come across as very nice, very genteel, charming people, and then as time goes on, their grandiosity and their excessive need for attention and admiration, recognition starts coming in, and along with their lack of empathy, so they kind of sneak up on people.
And narcissists are well known for doing the proverbial love bombing. So often, if we're looking at people in relationships, especially, they start off, and it's exactly true. It's like they tend to they've got like a sense. They smell out people who've been hurt or who are gullible or vulnerable in any way. And they are very clever in the way they smell out their weaknesses, so to speak. And they are very clever in the way they find out what you like, what you don't like. And they will absolutely, for the first 6 months or so, love bomb you to the nth degree, where you think you've met the perfect person. And then the minute you relax into that relationship, boom, suddenly you start seeing the complete opposite of that. So,
Yeah. And like you said about
carry on.
politicians, one of the first traits of a narcissist is grandiosity, exaggerated sense of self-importance. You look at Macron. This sucker's going, oh yeah, we're going to take on the Russians. We can do it. We've got atomic bombs. And he sends over what, 1,000 troops or something, and 200 of them come back within a week in coffins. You know, the feeling that they're superior to other people. Macron is
Right.
another one, and this guy, the premier of Canada right now, is another. You look at them; they're this exaggerated grandiosity. They're uh, fantasies of unlimited success, brilliance and power. So here's Macron saying, we're going to take on the Russians. We send our army over there and take over the Russians. And here's the British going, well, we're going to send them these uh, shadow missiles, um, and expect not to be attacked. They're cruising for it. I mean, it that grandiosity, it's part of it.
yeah, that sense of almost, yeah, exactly. Delusions of grandeur, girl in a gong. I was about to say illusions of grandeur, but yeah, I think it's more like delusions of grandeur. And do you find that they will often live in the past? If they've maybe had past success?
Well, they need they need admiration. So, if there's something they succeeded in the past, they'll bring it up and they want to be admired for it. They got to be the
Right.
center of attention all the time. People around them feel mistreated, depleted and enraged, or they feel that way when they're ignored. They don't like to be ignored. They want attention. They suck attention. They thrive on attention. You know?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
their relationships tend to be superficial because um, they're based on just surface attributes a lot of time. Uh, they view people as to how much benefit that they can get from them. You know, very self-centered. You know. And,
Yeah, it's all about the gain. It's all about the gain.
mhm,
What's in it for them at the end of
mhm,
the day. Nothing is done without, and it's interesting. I actually watched a series the other day, and I didn't intend to watch it for so long. I thought it was like a few episodes. It ended up being, I don't know how many, but wow, it was fascinating. Literally, this mother, who's a narcissistic mother of four sons, and one of the sons has a twin sister and a daughter. But how she absolutely, she's a criminal, right? Turns the entire family into this criminal organization, hates the daughter, kicks the daughter out while she's 8 months pregnant. Um, when she comes back, takes her to rehab, but then drops her off in the street with the homeless people. But no feeling, no nothing. You stole from me, and this is your punishment. And there's absolutely no coming back from that. So, and just the games that are played, the division, the conquering, the lies, the manipulation, the subtle, the chaos. It's like the silent chaos that is caused. I think in the experiences or generally dealings I've had with people, especially that have been dealing with narcissists, there's that underlying occurrence. Um, Absolute manipulators they will show you a face that is so sweet, so kind, so tender. Oftentimes, be very be victims, right? Play the victim role very well. They perfect that victim role perfectly, and they can have many different faces. That's one thing I know for sure. So
yeah,
I'm not.
and
Yeah,
they completely lack empathy. It's very limited. They care about themselves and not they don't care about the needs of others, and including their loved ones. So just a very severe lack of empathy. So a difference between schizophrenics and narcissists is schizophrenics don't seek admiration. They're more reclusive. They want to go be locked in a bedroom somewhere with their voices and stay away from people. They don't like to interact with people. So they don't have any empathy for themselves. They don't have any empathy for anybody else. Um, they 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 don't they can't form relationships, so they're they they're not very good at exploiting them. You know they uh, they have a hard time with relationships. I mean, people have to kind of hang on to them, or they will just kind of disappear off to themselves in their own world. Um, so schizophrenics
it,
are
are
kind
we
of real
talk
self-centered also. What'd you say?
right? Now, I wanted to, were you saying that about schizophrenics that will take themselves off into their own room and lock themselves up? Is that more schizophrenic trait?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very different from the narcissist who's kind of feeding off of the victim's energy, and
Exactly.
manipulating the victim. The schizophrenics just want to stay away from everybody. The voices have them where they want them in the room, locked up by themselves, just listening to whatever the voices tell them. So a narcissist, he's hearing voices in his head too, but they're very different from the kind that schizophrenics hear.
Right.
Narcissists they're superficial and they're rigid. Narcissists, their self stability remains on their image. They're very concerned about their image. They're grandiose and easily threatened. So if you go to expose their cover, they'll blow on you. Right? So patients who a victim who goes to expose them is in for trouble. Yeah, relationships they only use to try to bolster their self-image. Interactions are often superficial, and intimacy past the getting hold of the victim is often missing once the cover is blown. Okay. Schizophrenics also have an identity disturbance. They're listening to those voices that they believe are who they are, but they're not. So even though psychiatry says they're hallucinations, they've never studied them. I mean, those voices run patterns, very repeatable, specific patterns. So if they run patterns, they can't be hallucinations. So here's psychiatry saying, "Oh yeah, they're hallucinations. Your brain is broken. You got a chemical brain imbalance." I haven't seen any narcissists really seek help. They don't seem to think they have a problem. But their victims are pouring in. I mean, I have a lot of them in my practice. With the Mace energy method, that were severely damaged by narcissists. Narcissists have a chronic feeling of emptiness and boredom, and they don't like transitions. They don't like things changing. Now there's found 13 traits of narcissism. They're preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. So here you go with guys like Macron again. Fantasies of unlimited success, power, and brilliance. He stole the election in France. I don't know how many times now, 3, 4 times. This Carney stole the election in Canada, and is up there, just bragging like, yeah, we're going to bring the U.S. down. We're not going to put up with this kind of stuff. They're headed for disaster. There's the narcissist believes that he or she has special or unique, or is special and unique, and can only be understood by others of the same ilk. High status people. They seek out attention and high status people. They have a need for excessive admiration. All right. So they're looking for people who will kind of bolster their ego. They have a sense of
And take them
entitlement.
places.
Yeah. They're users. They use people, and they'll suck their victims dry. They have a sense of entitlement. They'll butt into lines in grocery stores and stuff like that. They feel like they are owed something. They interpersonally exploit others. They see other people as their tools. They have a lack of self-awareness and effect that they have on other people. So all selfish self-interest for the most part, expecting others to sacrifice for them. Okay? They lack empathy. They have a cold inability to accurately recognize how other people feel. So they're kind of like bulls in the china shop. They like to believe that others are envious of them. They're arrogant, haughty, and self-righteous. They hurt others in relationships. They're unable to forge or maintain more than superficial relationships. They don't have emotional capacity to relate in authentic ways.
True. So they'll often copycat emotions. They don't really have the emotions themselves. So they will copycat something they've seen on television or family member or something. They mimic emotions. They don't feel them, but they mimic them perfectly.
Mm-hmm. So there are some similarities, but narcissists kind of suck the life out of people. Schizophrenics they avoid events. They don't like to be around a lot of people, and they avoid interactions. So they're kind of moving in opposite directions there. The schizophrenic is often irritable, where the narcissist will get irritable if they're exposed. Otherwise, they play their game. The schizophrenic will often have problems at work or school, where the narcissist has navigated that stuff. I mean, they are taking over corporations, they've taken over governments. They're very functional, but they're very, very self-centered. All those
Clever,
schizophrenics are
sly.
very sly. Where schizophrenics, the voices are sly, but they don't operate very successfully. They trip over their own
Right.
feet. They can't hold jobs. They can't think straight because they have those voices going on in their heads. The narcissist does too, but it's all for their own gain. They have a desperate need for external validation, and they have a very fragile self-esteem. They can be very motivated, where schizophrenics usually aren't motivated at all. The narcissist guy, he'll go to parties and con people and be the head of governments. They can be social when they need to. Schizophrenic just seek social isolation. They don't want to be around people. They don't want to be in parties. They don't want to be dealing with anybody. The schizophrenic, they say, well, they see things that others don't. Okay, so they label them as crazy. They hear things that others don't, so they label them as crazy. But the schizophrenics do see and hear those things, and those things, especially the auditory, what they refer to as auditory hallucinations, they run very clean, clear, specific patterns over and over again. After interviewing hundreds and hundreds of them, those patterns are the same. They run the same pattern. So if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. So the schizophrenic will hear voices that other people don't, carry on conversations with them, where a narcissist doesn't do that. They're still very much in this reality, that we're in, but they're operating at a totally different level. Schizophrenics are in another reality.
Would it be fair to say, because it's like you're explaining polar opposites to me here. It's like the same pain, let's say trauma or whatever it might be. A narcissist sounds like they've got this an overt ego. Too much ego. I'm the greatest and I'm clever. Mm-hmm. And of course, oftentimes, especially in governments and stuff, they've been programmed and they've been pushed by their secret societies to become these positions. So they really have been carefully placed, like Macron and friends. But then you look at a schizophrenic this also has had a lot of trauma, but instead of going out and being bold and I'm the greatest, I'm this, has completely gone introverted. Leave me alone. I want to be alone. I can hear the voices. The world thinks I'm crazy. I'm not anyone of importance. I'm all these characters in my head. I have no idea who I am. I'm lost. Whereas a narcissist goes, I'm the one. I'm the one. Sounds like these are polar opposites to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very different levels. But they're both destructive. The narcissist is destructive to others. The schizophrenic is destructive to himself and others. Exactly. If they adopt him. I remember one prisoner I was talking to one day who he found a very nice, pretty girl. I mean, and I don't know what it is, but there's some women that they come and visit prisoners in prison. They're attracted to the bad boys for some reason. I have no idea. They're good-looking women. They have jobs, and this guy took up with one of them, and he just described to me one day how he completely destroyed her. Step by step, he destroyed her until she was just a wreck. So schizophrenics, or the voices schizophrenics here, view anybody who tries to help them as an enemy. Where narcissists view anybody who tends to expose them as an enemy.
Exactly.
So the narcissist want attention.
I want to ask you about the schizophrenic though, because if you're describing your schizophrenic patient who step by step destroyed his girlfriend or partner, or was that a narcissist you were describing?
Oh, he was crazy.
Schizophrenic.
Yeah, he was hearing voices.
Okay, so if they have lots of attachments, could part or some or one of those attachments not be a narcissist? And then when they're going into, let's say, a certain zone, for example, they would then channel that really nasty narcissist. So then that narcissist would be the one that then breaks down his partner systematically, but then at the same time, there could be another voice that tells him to go and say sorry and patch it up, and you know what I'm saying? So I'm wondering if that doesn't play itself out within the schizophrenic anyway, or if it's possible, not necessarily 100% sure that it does, but that it's a possible outlet for some of those voices to have very narcissistic tendencies and make them do and say things that are seriously nasty.
You know what popped into my head is when I was working in the emergency room at one of the big hospitals here in Tucson. In comes this, and he was Muslim, and he comes in with his Muslim son, who was psychotic, and he had to kind of drag him in, and here's the story. So the family was living in California, I believe it was, and the father got a job here in Tucson. the son had a girlfriend. He was hearing voices. He had a girlfriend in California. He didn't want to leave. Right? So the family moved to Tucson and left this boy with his girlfriend. And this guy was hearing voices. And he was getting, here's this girl that didn't know anything about psychosis or mental illness, who had been taken in by him from the start. And then as the psychosis started getting worse, she would lock the bedroom door. She wouldn't let him in there at night. He would sleep out in the living room. And she would hear him talking to himself and pacing the floor all night. Okay. And she would urge him, listen, you got to go get a job. You know, he couldn't handle the job. He didn't want to go to a job. And she was trying to support him, like, oh, you know, if I just love him enough, he'll come around. That didn't happen. The more love she gave him, the more irritable the voices got, right? To the point where she had to lock herself in the bedroom at night because she was kind of afraid of him.
Mm.
So one night he gets up and she hears the front door open of the apartment. So she gets up, she looks out the window, and this guy had a big butcher knife. And he was out there kneeling on the lawn and stabbing the lawn with this butcher knife, this big butcher knife. He's like, killing the ground. She saw that. That really scared her. She locked the door and she called the police. He came back and he demanded to be let in again with this butcher knife. And she said, I called the police, they're coming, and he ran. So I think she got a restraining order on him, but he was out on his own now and he couldn't support himself. So he contacts his family in Arizona and they bring him to Tucson. And here he is going, I really, he got to the point where he's telling the father, this is my house. You guys get out, and he would fight with the father who would take offense at what he was saying. And I forgot what his name was, but he didn't like to be called by his birth name. So if his family called him by the name they knew him as, he would get extremely angry and he would start fighting with them. He said, I am no longer John Doe. I am Sam Q. John Doe's dead. He's not here anymore. So here he's telling the family that. And the family's going, what is going on with you? And when they argued with him, he would get violent. So he hit his father once, and one of the brothers came and beat the crap out of him, threw him in his room, and told him, "You keep this up. We're gonna finish you off. We're gonna make you regret hitting our father." Right? So what was so strange about it was where he was so taken over by these voices that he didn't even want to be called by his birth name. That infuriated him. And here he is telling these people that that person who he was is dead. So I don't know how he took in this woman. That they can hide those symptoms for a while, but not for very long. They know something is wrong. So that's very different from a regular narcissist. I mean, they usually are able to operate without going into that kind of nonsense where they're operating totally in another world. You ask them who they are, they'll tell you who they are or who they believe they are.
Yeah, absolutely. But then that one has that as a schizophrenic, where obviously he had opened himself up to some murderous energy that was driving his body.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, like we talked about before, these voices that the schizophrenics hear, they're not hallucinations. They run very well-defined patterns. And You can find them on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. And any of you guys who are working with schizophrenics, go there and look. You'll see them for yourself. Go to articles, go to my website, jerrymarzinsky.com, then go to articles, and then go to patterns the voices run. You'll see them for yourself. It's not, they don't kick them up into, oh, it's a biological imbalance thing where you can't see what they're talking about. Same thing with the genetics. They kicked them up and, oh, it's a genetics abnormality. No, the geneticists didn't find any schizophrenia germ, and the biochemists aren't finding any chemical imbalance either. So,
do you, sorry, Jerry, I wanted to ask you, do you think that because there's a lot of talk of this voice to skull technology that they're using at this point in time? I mean, a lot of the survivors speak about it as well. I think it's also direct energy weapons, that sort of thing. That through programming or using certain technologies, you can actually make a person think they're hearing thoughts. But meanwhile, it's some technology. Do you think that part of the schizophrenia that we are hearing so much about nowadays, do you think it could be that related to that as well?
well, I've heard that they have that technology. I've never worked with anybody that I thought was affected by that. And, it, I think they have to traumatize these people to some degree. But one thing I was afraid of is when I revealed these patterns that the schizophrenics actually run, that the voices actually say, is that these voice to skull people, if they mimic that, then there would be no way to determine what was schizophrenia and what these people were transmitting into the victims' heads. And on top of that, there's a lot of schizophrenics who believe that they're being controlled by the government also. It what's so dangerous about that is when they don't take responsibility and say it's somebody else. It's somebody beyond my reach. Now with the voices are there. They can act against the voices, the schizophrenic voices. There's things they can do to fight back against the schizophrenic voices. A lot of things. First of all, realizing that they are not the victim. They're not the person themselves. Okay. But when you start going, okay, it's not anything under my purview, it's so far out that I can't do anything about it, that becomes very dangerous because then they absolve themselves of any responsibility for doing something to help themselves. It's the
Right.
government. I'm helpless. And
Yes,
that's what the psychiatrists are friggin' doing anyway.
exactly.
Schizophrenics goes into the office and they go, "Oh, well, you're schizophrenic. It's a life sentence. You got to take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. Your brain is broken. You've got a chemical imbalance of the brain." It's a complete lie. It's a fabrication. And most psychiatrists, I don't think they even are aware of that. They're brainwashed in medical school that this is a chemical imbalance. They believe that, like I did when I got out of graduate school. But you watch them, and if it's a chemical imbalance, you go, well, what's the baseline? Where's your test for the baseline? If you've got a chemical imbalance in your brain, what's out of balance by how much? They don't have any such test. If you watch what they do, the patient comes in the office, I'm hearing voices. Okay, you're schizophrenic. We got to give you one of these antipsychotic drugs, which are toxic. They're all toxic. And they have horrible side effects. The people don't want to stay on them, and they don't cure anything. You know, they don't want to cure. Schizophrenia is a perfect disorder for them. They just keep treating the symptoms and treating the symptoms and treating the symptoms, and then the person goes off the medicines, and those symptoms reappear. Right? So they're going, well, this is the only treatment, but it's not the only treatment. There's stuff coming out now that are actually curing schizophrenics. You know, Mace will help with some of the ones that aren't severely schizophrenic. The ones that are moderately schizophrenic, it will remove the traumas that feed these voices. And it doesn't work well at all with advanced schizophrenics that are real far out there. But it works a lot better to finding a permanent cause than these drugs that the schizophrenics or that the psychiatrists are giving schizophrenics. Those drugs are toxic. They do shrink your brain. I mean, they found long-term schizophrenics who were in mental hospitals, state mental hospitals. Their brains were shrunk due to these antipsychotic drugs. The symptoms are awful.
But wouldn't, if the brain is being shrunk by these medications, and I know we have spoken about that before, I'm wondering, would that not give then these attachments, entities, even more room to screw around in that person's head? If you think about it, it's shrinking that capacity to think normally and functionally, right?
Yeah.
So all they feel now really is fear and anxiety and stress. And these voices must be getting louder and louder, because if they've gotten to the stage where their brain is shrunken already, that's a lot of meds they've taken over the years.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing in the state hospitals. They use those drugs just to control these people. But for the average person out on the street, there's a lot of functional schizophrenics out there. I didn't think so until I started my private practice. But yeah, they're coming in, they're holding a job, they're hearing voices. There's truck drivers that are driving these giant tractor trailers down the road, listening to their voices, delivering, loads across the country, and driving safely while they're carrying on conversation with the voices. It's a perfect job for a schizophrenic. They don't have to deal with anybody. They're in there by themselves. Maybe they have a dog in the truck with them. Driving away happily, listening to the voices.
Got a bus load of people with me. Sometimes maybe we even sing along together. Oh my goodness.
Well, it's usually not happy stuff. The voices are always negative. You're no good, you're rotten, you're ugly, you're stupid. Every rotten thing that you could ever think of showing up there.
Always negative.
Always negative. And most schizophrenics have suffered severe, trauma, which is what MACE works very well with is trauma. So what you see is once you start getting rid of the trauma, the voices get weaker and they come less often.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's probably one of the most effective therapies that I've seen to deal with any psychological illness. I've never seen anything in all my 45 years on the front lines that work as well as MACE does. And these things are gone in an hour.
It's brilliant.
John Mace, who came up with it, he was a genius. I mean, he wanted to know how the mind worked, and that's what he spent his whole life doing.
And it's so amazing that people like this, like this, have shared that knowledge. I know it's also with some of the Rife, with the Rife machine, the Spooky 2 Rife machine that I promote as well. I mean, that guy who came up with the original software, I mean, he was unalived. So when that sort of stuff starts happening, we have to know that we're on the right track here. So I know the MACE method is amazing. It really, it really does. Duca, I'm going to say, no, I don't think hypnosis works as well. I think it can work to a point, depending. But when you're looking at, for example, the MACE method, you see, with hypnosis, you're going into details. You like seeing things and figuring things out. With the MACE, you don't. It's like a bag of a boil that you're opening and you're just releasing. Doesn't matter what gunk you're releasing, you're just letting go. And you feel that release. It's like you come out of there feeling 10 times lighter, and suddenly suddenly your mind then just goes, wow, I suddenly get it. It's like you've cleared brain fog. You've cleared emotional fog. You've cleared psychic fog. You've cleared grease off your energy. It's like you've gotten in the shower and given yourself a fantastic scrub down for the first time in your life. That's the kind of feeling. Things
Yeah,
make sense to you.
and the person feels it right away. I mean, within an hour. You know,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
so kind of what it's like is getting you can get a brand new car battery, charge it up full, and if you drain it down to nothing, you can't charge that battery up again. It's dead. So Mace does the same thing with psychological trauma. Okay, so
Right.
when you're first traumatized, there's a really bad feeling, and you make a decision as to what part you played in that trauma. And that bad feeling stays there for a long time until the ego shows up and says, okay,
Exactly.
this is interfering with your survival. Let me handle this. It takes it and it locks it down in the subconscious, right? But it's locked down alive. It's not dead. And it affects your behavior. It affects what you think. It affects what you say. It affects what you don't say. It affects what you do, what you don't do. It has a big effect on your attitude toward life. And it's running in the background because it's subconscious. So now you're not feeling the pain anymore because it's buried in the subconscious, but it's still affecting your behavior. And the way it affects your behavior is that if somebody who is similar to the person who traumatized you shows up in your life, that thing's like a landmine. It triggers, and every time it triggers, it gets stronger, right? And then the more it triggers, the stronger it
Exactly.
gets until it starts taking you over, right?
It's
So
like a momentum that gathers.
yes, yep, and it takes the person's control. It takes their energy. So to keep something like that locked into um, your mind, your subconscious, it's like an energy ridge. The egos keep wanting to keep it in there so it doesn't come out and cause pain, and the energy that is locked in there wants to come out. So there's an energy ridge. It's like the wall of a balloon. The pressure air in the balloon
Exactly.
wants to get out, and the atmosphere is keeping it in. So, and it
Exactly.
takes your energy to keep it in there. Okay. So it becomes a
Exactly.
pool of negative energy. Okay. And
Exactly.
it's sucking your energy. Okay. But it's also interfering with uh, your ability to function in the world. So if somebody comes along that has similar traits to the person who traumatized you, this thing blows. And it tells you to either attack that person, to run from that person, or to avoid that person. Right. So you're going to have trouble with people who are like the people who traumatized you. And the closer that person is to the person who traumatized you, the bigger the reaction is going to be. Right? Until you either attack them or run from them. So it's going to interfere with your interpersonal relationships with that particular type of person. So it's like a landmine waiting to be set off by that particular kind of person. Now these people
Exactly.
aren't psychotic, but psychotics have that big pool of negative energy in there also. But the voices don't want that interfered with. They feed off of that. They trigger that. you know so you might look at this negative identity as the buttons. You say people are pushing my buttons. That's a button. Mace takes away the buttons. Okay. The other way that this negative pool of energy shows up is you might you've been in trouble 2 or 3 times for something, and you swear to yourself, I'm never going to get in trouble for that again. And you go, I'm not going to do it. 6 months later, you're right back in the same place again. It's because of this negative identity that's stuck in there. It's like a mind virus. So it operates kind of like a computer virus behind the scenes. So you don't see it operating other than in the 2 instances that I told you about, but it's affecting your entire life. And what's so sad is, some of these old ladies that come that are, they've been, they've had enough, and they're 75, 80 years old, and something happened to them when they were 4 or 5 years old that made them feel that they were worthless. And they're still feeling that way after 70, 80 years. In an hour, that's gone. That feeling of worthlessness is gone. Because it actually drains that negative energy. So what's interesting about MACE is it has a spiritual component, very much unlike any other traditional psychotherapy. Negative energy moves toward positive energy. It's one of the things that John Mace found. So he found that the negative energy in these big pools of negative, the trauma, that negative energy will, if you set up the bridge that Mace does, it will move toward the spirit, and the spirit will transmute it. It won't destroy it. It will transmute it and turn it into positive energy. So that negative pool of energy is gone, and it's gone within an hour.
Because as we know, energy can never be created or destroyed, only ever transferred or transformed. Most of us take, and those negative emotions absolutely create the suffering, the mental dialogue that just doesn't stop, like on that hamster's wheel, right? So
That's
it's
exactly
that
right.
constant, that constant negative dialogue.
See, when
Sorry,
you're
Jerry, I
feeling,
think we have a carry on.
when you're feeling bad, you're going to think bad, and then you ask yourself, like, well, who's listening to those thoughts?
Exactly. It's you.
So those thoughts aren't
And are
who
those
you
your
are.
thoughts,
They're
or are
not
they
your
not?
thought. The same thing with schizophrenics. If, we're all hearing a voice in our head, rambling about everything under the sun all day long. It's going on. If you think those thoughts are you, then who is listening to those thoughts? It's the entity that's listening to those thoughts. Who are you?
Exactly.
You're not your thoughts. Schizophrenia is the same way. Those thoughts, those voices, are not the person who is listening to them. They're independent. Now, if you start listening to those thoughts, then you start creating a world that mimics those thoughts. So schizophrenics are listening to a certain frequency of thought, which is very low negative frequency. Narcissists are listening to another frequency, which is also low and negative, but it's more functional than schizophrenic thoughts.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's sure. And really, at the end of the day, when our emotions are tuned in, when we feel joy in life, when we start doing things that make us happy, and that start doing things that lift our frequency, raise our vibration, it's like we walk out of that. We walk away from the voices. The voices can't go beyond a certain place because they are trapped in negativity, And if you are still trapped in that negativity, they're going to come at you full force, for sure. So it's up to us to do that releasing.
Well, you can do that, but what the voices do is they will do everything they can to prevent you from doing the things that
Yes,
you
exactly.
enjoy. They'll convince you, oh, this is garbage. One of the things I recommend my clients is to, watch America's Funniest Videos or some comedy show. The voices don't want you feeling good. They want you feeling bad because they live off of that negative emotional energy that they generate. They are parasites. So they will interfere with you doing good stuff. They don't want you exercising. They don't want you playing racquetball or tennis or anything that you enjoy. They don't want you doing that. So they'll do everything they can to confine you and keep you away from that. So there's a battle that emerges when a schizophrenic tries to do stuff that makes them feel good. And you look at a lot of the kind of music they listen to. It's this acid rock, what do you call it? That rap stuff that's full of all this negative, kill people and demonic stuff.
Exactly.
That's what they want you listening to. They want you playing those violent video games, where you're killing people
Right.
all the time. Watching war movies and murder mysteries and all that kind of stuff. I mean, ABC runs a consistent program of murder mysteries. I mean, they have a whole series of this. That are people watching this stuff. I mean, what does that do to your mind? It's like tells you, well, the world is a very dangerous place. You know, and then these people with the video games. Here's by the time a kid gets to 16, he's watched what, a couple thousands of murders on TV. So here's the TV saying, this is what you do when you get pissed off: get a gun and go shoot somebody. Right? They're advertising that on TV all the time by the shows they're showing, and these violent video games. Another thing, now they won't interfere with those, but over here in the U.S., they'll go after your guns. Yeah, it's the guns that shoot people. They want people to believe it's the guns who shoot people, not the people. And you look
Yeah,
at
exactly.
mental health in the United States is garbage. I mean, they're not doing anything that really works here. They're drugging the brain. The pharmaceutical industry has billions of dollars to do advertisements. I think they just stopped them just recently from advertising on the TV. They were 3/4 of all the advertisements in the U.S. until recently, until Trump got in, were advertisements for some kind of stupid drug. And they'd come up with all these symptoms that kind of common symptoms, and say, well, if you have this, ask your doctor about this. So they're asking the patient to ask their doctor about their medicines. I mean, it's such a scam. It's
Right.
incredible.
Wow. And it sounds to me like a lot of that voice to skull technology must be used with these guys as well, because so many, when you speak to so many of these guys, and I'm sitting thinking, when I was speaking to some of the guys in Australia that were taken to this boys' home near Durrick, I think the place was called, and Ivan Milat was quite a prolific serial killer in Australia in the heyday, in his heyday, and this particular guy was interviewing was in this boys' home with Milat, and they were being groomed and programmed to become these horrific creatures that they were. They were trafficked into these nightclubs. I mean, horrific things, Jerry. And he speaks about the day he realized his programming wasn't there. It had broken because his phone rang. He lifted up, he picked up the phone to take the call, and this voice said something, and he went, what are you talking about? He knew. And then he realized at some point later. But there is that type of programming that they do with these guys. So I'm sure part of this must be that as well, especially
Well, I
if
think
they had them.
that's what they did to that guy who took a shot at Trump, that young kid.
Yeah.
Evidence is coming out that he's had contact with the FBI prior to that. That they looked like they were
Wow.
grooming him, but boy, that stuff just disappeared. It came out briefly and then it just disappeared. They didn't
Wow.
investigate what happened there. The Democrats kind of just swept it under the rug. Oh, that's in the past now.
Wow. Ah, well, I think it's super interesting, and I'm just grateful that people like you, Jerry, are speaking about this stuff and it's coming to the fore. So I'm wondering, before we wrap it up for today, do you have one more story you can tell us? Just a story about you or someone you've worked with?
Well, when you said that, one popped into my head. I don't know if I told you that this one before. It was schizophrenics when they get angry. I guess this may be similar to narcissists, but when they get angry, they get supernaturally strong. I mean, just well way beyond the point of a normal human being. I mean, I've watched one like 150-pound schizophrenic bounce two big guards around the inside of his cell like they were kind of popcorn. I mean, they became supernaturally strong. But the one that I heard of, okay, and so I talked to two people who actually witnessed this that I trusted. It happened in a big prison in Florence, Arizona. It was the main prison. It's like the big prison in the state. And on one of the cell blocks where they were locked down almost 24 hours a day, except for maybe one few hours out in the sun every day. But there's this one big, strong schizophrenic who was in one of the bottom cells that they wanted to move into another place. Okay, so the guards come up to him and they go, "Hey, Johnson, cuff up." And he goes, I'm not cuffing anything. Go screw yourselves." And they said, "Cuff up, or we're gonna hit you with the pepper spray. Stick your hands out the cell. Let's cuff you up." "No, I'm not doing it. Screw you people." And so they argued for a while, and then finally the guards broke out the pepper spray and they pointed it at him. He put a towel around his head, and they just drenched him in this pepper spray. I don't know if you ever had any contact with that stuff. It is nasty stuff. It burns. If you get it on your face or in your eyes, it just virtually blinds you. I mean, it just immobilizes you. And after they had these quart cans of it, it's like these big spray bottles of it. And they emptied one, if not two of those on him. And after they were done, he pulled the towel off his face and he said, "Screw you with your pepper spray." And I'm not going anywhere. So he's mocking them and making fun of them. And now it's a show. The whole prison is watching it. All three tiers are at their bars watching what's going on there. So instead of the guards going, "You come out of there, we're going to turn off your water. We're not going to feed you until you come out and cuff up," and just let him stay there for a day or two. He'll come out without any, no, they weren't like that. They hire these kind of macho guys at the prison that, "Yeah, we can handle anything," kind of thing. Instead of using their heads, they were challenging this guy, and he was psychotic. And so they said, "Okay, you don't come out of there. We're going to get the stun guns." So what they did is they had a little tiny wire that attached to this like arrowhead they'd fire it and it would go into the person's body, and then they'd fire a 50,000 watt voltage charge in there. I don't know how many amps, but every time I saw that used, it just knocked them down cold. I mean, it was like they got hit with a sledgehammer, ended up on the ground. This guy stood in the middle of his cell, just shaking. He's just, quivering like he was being electrocuted, but he did not go down. So they had two of them. They fired another one in him, and while one was hitting him with the charge, the other one was charging up. So here they were alternating one after the other, boom, 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 boom. They did that 13 times before the warden stopped it and said, "Hey, I'm going to get hit with cruel and unusual punishment. Stop this." Right? After 13 times. Right. But the guy still didn't go down and refused to come out of his cell, and he's daring them to come in and get him. At that point, nobody's going to go in that cell. And now here's the big standoff with all the prisoners watching what's going on. And this psychotic guy's winning so far. He hasn't caved into him despite two of their biggest control devices. Right? So then they say, "You don't come out of there, we're going to go get the attack dogs." The prisoners were terrified of the attack dogs. I mean, these were these very expensive dogs. I think they bought from Germany that were trained specifically to attack people, on command, and they would rip you to pieces. The prisoners were terrified of the attack dogs more than they were anything else. So they said, "You come out of there, we're going to go get the attack dogs." And he goes, "You come on and get me, you bunch of pandy waces, you bunch of fairies." He's really mocking them. The prisoners on the upper cells are loving this. So they went and got the attack dog. And they gave him another chance. They said, "You come out of there, or we're going to sick the dogs on you. And he's like, you come in and get me. Send your dogs in here. It's like high tension time. I mean, this is like the final draw. The, the last chance they had to kind of force him out of there before they actually had to leave him there for a while, which they should have done in the first place. So they give him a warning. He's cussing at them, mocking them, making fun of them, and all the stuff that they're doing. And so they slide the cell open. They stick the dog on him. He's sitting on his bed, and the dog runs in there and jumps up at him, and he throws his arm in front of his face, and the dog clamps onto his arm and bites down to the bone. Right. So he's gushing blood, and he pulls the dog up to his face, and he looks the dog in the eye, and he says, "Sit." And the dog sat. It didn't let go of him, but it sat. And the dog trainer's out there going, "What the dickens is going on in there?" And everybody's stunned. And then he starts petting the dog while it's got its jaws into his arm, and he starts petting it and saying, "Good puppy, good puppy." So they had a rope on the dog, and they pulled on the rope, and the dog didn't let go of him, so they pulled him out of the cell, and then they beat the crap out of him. So these guys get supernaturally strong. So you don't want to piss them off. And that's one of the things that I tell the women who come for therapy, who have suffered or are still living with a schizophrenic. They're dangerous. You don't want to piss them off. They will hurt you. And if they attack you, you need to call the police. You need to. You can't deal with this on your own. You need to call for help. They'll seriously hurt you. I think we brought Janine on, didn't we? Didn't we bring Janine on one time, to the mother of a psychotic killer?
Yes, with her son.
Yeah, her son almost killed her a couple of times. And she knew the last time she saw him that if she didn't lock herself in there and call the police, he would have. Yeah.
So schizophrenics are a lot more dangerous physically than a narcissist would be. So they're actually capable of doing you a lot of bodily, physical harm as well. A narcissist is more a mind killer, emotions. So it's more
they won't tend to be as violent as often. They might get you behind your back, or they might sabotage you, or they might end your career, some sneaky way. So they're dangerous, but for the most part, they're not as physically dangerous as a schizophrenic.
Well, this is definitely, the voices told me to do it. We hear about that a lot. So
right,
absolutely.
And that's what a lot of these people in the courts are telling these people. The judge, the voices made me do it. I didn't do it. The voices made me do it. And the judge goes, "Yeah, these people are crazy. That's a hallucination." But it's not. These people are actually hearing these voices that run patterns. And if they run patterns, they can't be hallucinations. And yet psychiatry will not look into it. They won't study it. The medical industry won't study these voices. Psychology won't study these voices. There's very little about them. Just coming through, what was it, 8 years of higher education, they didn't say hardly anything about the voices except their hallucinations and that they might sound like word salad. So when I got on the front lines, these guys were carrying on long, coherent conversations with those voices. They were actually talking to them. It wasn't word salad like the psychiatrists and the psychology books tell you it is. They're actually hearing and carrying on coherent conversations with these voices that only they can hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're very real.
Wow.
So the first thing schizophrenic needs to know is that those voices are not him. They might sound like him. They want you to believe that they are you. And I've had a number of prisoners, schizophrenic prisoners, ask their voices, "Who are you? What are you?" And they would say, "We are you." So they want the victim to believe that those voices they hear in their head are who they are. They want to take over the person that is hearing the voices, and they're very dangerous. So
Absolutely.
they have to split themselves off from the voices, and that's the opposite of what friggin' psychiatry's tell them. Psychiatry's tell them your brain is broken. These voices are due to a chemical imbalance of their brain, and that the only thing you can do is take our toxic medications. Despite the fact that that chemical imbalance theory has been debunked long ago. I mean, they're all brainwashed. They're brainwashed by big pharma that controls our major educational institutions, especially the medical schools.
Exactly, Jerry. Wow.
Right, so I got a lot more information on schizophrenia on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. We got some testimonials on there from people who've gone through the MACE energy method and come out very much better just even an hour later, and videos on MACE and on schizophrenia.
Absolutely. Jerry, it's always such a pleasure talking to you. And I want to just say thank you so, so much for very interesting comparison. And it's so easy to actually see now the difference, because as you say, the schizophrenic is more introverted, the narcissist is more me, I'm the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
But the schizophrenic is actually a lot more dangerous than the narcissist, because you never know who's going to start working through the body and tell them to do what and get them to do all sorts of things.
Yeah,
Right?
they're more dangerous to themselves and others. So
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
suicide rate for schizophrenics is 3 to 5 times that of the normal population, because one of the things these voices tell them is to kill themselves. You're no good. You're rotten. You're
Right.
worthless. You're just a drag on everybody around you. You just kill yourself and get it over with. I mean, and they use the same phrase over and over and over again. And it's very hard to kill yourself. It's not easy. It creates a lot of anxiety, and they feed off of that anxiety. So you might wonder,
Exactly.
well,
C'est louche.
okay, yeah, loosh. You might wonder, well, if the patient kills themselves, then what are these things going to feed off of? But you look at what happens to the families of schizophrenics who kill themselves. They go, "Oh, I could have done more," or I should have done this, or I should have done that, or I should have taken him to an institution, or they start blaming themselves for the client's suicide. And it affects the whole family. So here you have a bunch of people feeling bad now
Yes.
that these things are feeding off of. And again, they don't just get the schizophrenic, they get all of us. Every negative thought, every negative intrusive thought that comes into your head is put there by these entities that are in a different level, but they're in our environment. You ask, where do thoughts come from? Nobody's ever found a thought in anybody's head. You look at the work of what is it, the 100th monkey guy? What was his name?
Yes. I can't remember his name, but I know we know the 100 monkeys.
Yeah, he's
100
talking
monkey
about
syndrome.
he's talking about morphogenic fields. He did a
Yes.
study on these islands where he would teach monkeys, 1 or 2 monkeys, to dip their bananas in salt water, and watched what happened. And once it hit 100 monkeys that learned to dip their bananas in salt water to make them taste better, then it spread to all these other islands where there were monkeys. So he's talking about a morphogenetic field, a field outside your head where thoughts come from. They're frequencies, and your brain is like a radio receiver. It's tuned to a certain frequency, and then with schizophrenics, if you try to force that frequency change, the voices force it back again. It's like you try to change the dial to another frequency, and they force it back again. But you have to understand that they're not you. The voices, And even the voice that you hear in your head that right now, that all of you guys are hearing in your head, that voice that's constantly talking in the background, that's not who you are. You're the entity that is listening to that stuff, and you don't have to let it all in. You don't have to let any of it in. You have a choice as to what you're going to entertain. Where you put your attention is where you put your energy.
Yeah, exactly. Tension goes, or energy goes where energy flows, where attention goes, for
Right.
sure. And
Right.
that is just the way that it is. There's nothing airy fairy about that.
And that's one of the
Well,
aspects that Mace uses exclusively, because it's actually controlling, the therapist is actually controlling where your energy goes and where your attention goes, and is kind of showing you what to do with it to get rid of these negative identities or these traumas. So it all has to
exactly.
do with attention, and energy and frequency.
Exactly. Exactly. So be happy, everybody. Do things that bring you joy. Go walk on the beach, go take your dog for a walk, go smell the flowers, smell the fresh air, hug your kids, whatever. Just watch a funny movie. All of these things really all contribute to that high vibrating. And yes, you can hit that like button for this channel to be even higher vibrating. Thank you. Jerry, I appreciate you so, so, so very much. And as you guys can see, Jerry's website is on the scrolling at the bottom of the screen. So go check it out for all his shows, his books. Jerry, is there anything you maybe want to announce that's coming up for you that you want to share with our viewers?
Well, we got in northern Arizona, we have a gathering of people like me. I forgot the name of it, so that doesn't help any. But yeah, just
Jerry,
watch your thoughts. Your thoughts aren't yours. Let the ones in that are helpful and keep the ones out that aren't.
exactly. and go catch Jerry's website. And I'm laughing because Jerry loves to forget things.
Oh, the older I get,
Which
the
is one
worse
of the
that gets.
reasons. Which is one of the reasons I love you, Jerry. I mean, guys, the other day I think the show, not the last one, the one before. I mean, we're having this full-on chat with Jerry, and the next minute, his wife comes in, and Jerry had forgotten that he had an appointment with his wife. So, literally mid-sentence,
That was bad.
we got cut off. I just sat here laughing, Jerry. That's the way we know you. That's the way we love you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that wasn't
I'll
a
help
good
you
thing.
remember when. I'll help you remember when you need to be on the show. Okay, Jerry.
All right. Yeah, next
Wonderful.
time what I'll
Okay,
do is
guys.
I'll hunt up some stories for next time and some transcripts, so I could take you right into what a therapy meeting was like with these schizophrenics when I was exploring what the voices were like.
That's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely. Please do. So we'll see you in 4 weeks. The first
Okay.
Saturday of August, we will see you back, Jerry.
Okay.
Appreciate you very, very, very well. I
All right.
mean,
Thanks
very,
for
very
having me.
much. Appreciate you. Always my pleasure. Great guest you are. Always having a best time hanging out with you. Take care, Jerry. God bless everybody. And I'll see you tomorrow with Jesse on Patreon Book Club. In the meantime, you're all just going to have yourselves a fabulous Saturday. I'm freezing, so I'm going to go climb into bed. Okay, everybody. Okay, bye.
Goodbye.
Don't be good.